As I mentioned in the previous video, we GMs have very little time to make our NPCs matter to our players. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized this is actually a bigger deal than I first thought. And that's because, just like YouTube, if your NPC cannot catch your player's attention within the first 8 seconds of meeting them, then your players will lose interest and walk away. Never mind that the NPC has a really compelling backstory, or that they're a critical part of the campaign, or that they're the next link in this quest chain. None of that matters because your players will not stick around long enough to discover that. Which brings me back around to why first impressions matter. Because if you can nail that, you can use your NPC to take your players wherever you want. So let's see how we can give our NPCs a strikingly good first impression. And if you stick around to the end, I'll show you another way that can really turn your players' heads. Number 1, describe the NPC in action. Remember that a lot of the game is going to take place in the theater of your players' minds, and therefore your descriptions are going to inform how they visualize the setting or scenario that they're in. Describing your NPC doing something remarkable leaves a much stronger impression than just giving a lore dump about them. Rather than saying something like this, as you step closer through the crowd, you see the renowned Bardy McBardbard, an exceptional minstrel known for playing skillfully in the courts of the local lords, until he was caught pilfering the silverware. Now see what happens when you describe Bardy in action. As you step closer through the crowd, you notice that a mage hand is skillfully playing the bard's instruments. Or, you see Bardy deftly picking the pockets of the patrons as he weaves his way through the crowd. Or, you see Bardy giving each patron a silver coin as he regales them with a grand tale. Notice how describing an action can instantly impact your impression of the NPC. Now there is a caveat to this which I'll get to later on in this video, but for now, describe the NPC doing something, rather than describing what the NPC has done. Number 2, put your NPCs in empathetic situations. I need to retcon what I said in the previous video. I mentioned that it was in Blake Snyder's book Save the Cat, where he gave this idea of making the audience sympathize with the protagonist. This was actually in another book called Save the Cat Writes a Novel by Jessica Brody. In one interview, she said, the most important thing for a protagonist is that they are relatable to the reader in some way. When we swap protagonist with NPC, the idea still holds. You want players to relate with your NPC in some way. The NPC doesn't have to be likable, but they need to connect with players. That said, imagine meeting Bardy, and then all of a sudden, a drunk patron calls him a fraud for plagiarizing another bard's song. Or, Bardy gets accused of stealing and is beaten senseless for the deed with no evidence to prove his guilt. Or, Bardy's efforts to compliment are taken as an insult by one of the wealthier, snootier patrons. Now, there are other ways to push the empathy buttons of your players. Just make sure that it's well within the boundaries that you and your players have agreed on. Pushing empathy buttons is never a license to cross any line of any kind, for whatever reason. Respect your players' boundaries. Number 3, using other NPCs to create intrigue about your NPC. Remember how I said earlier that you should avoid just telling things about your NPC? Here is the exception. When you use other NPCs to tell your players about your main NPC, this creates intrigue about the NPC in question. And you can use this to your advantage, because it gives the players an impression about this NPC whom they've never met yet. So imagine before you meet Bardy McBardbard, you overhear a town guard gushing about the arrival of the king's bard exiled for a crime he didn't commit. Or, a shopkeeper tells you to be on your guard against pickpocketing entertainers. Or, a street urchin asks you for a coin. And whether you give one or not, they compare you to the traveling bard that does. Now that we've made it to the end of the video, here's the little secret to make a powerful first impression. It's actually combining these elements to create a powerful head-turning first impression. Here's what I mean. Imagine if you saw Bardy using Mage Hand to play instruments, only to see that his right hand is actually missing, and then he gets accused of being a plagiarist by a drunk patron. Or imagine if you heard a rumor of a thieving bard, and saw Bardy pickpocketing patrons and getting caught and beaten. Serves him right, you think, until you see a small disheveled girl with tears in her eyes rushing up to see if he's okay. Or imagine hearing a rumor of a bard giving money from a street urchin, then later seeing a snooty noblewoman lashing out on a cowering bard for insulting her with a silver coin. You'll have plenty of time and prep to figure out the best way to engage your players. But if you need to think of something on the fly, picking one of these things, action, empathy, or intrigue, will suit you well. Making that first impression is crucial for getting your NPC on your player's radar. But here's the best part. They don't always have to be serious. Comic relief works just as well, and perhaps even more so. Whatever it takes, make that first impression last.